Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time to talk about the defense from that big win over let's see, who was it? The Bengals on Thursday night. Big divisional win, obviously. Here to join me to do that is Michael Crawford. Michael, how you doing?
Ken, I am doing really well. Appreciate you having me back. And another fun one, another exciting one with the Bengals and another win.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk football with you. As you know, Michael, you're one of my favorite people ever to do this show with. I wish we could do it more often. I know circumstances don't always allow for that, but thanks for making time for it this time. I guess we talked a little bit in advance about how different a conversation this would have been had, say, the Bengals made that 2-point conversion and the Ravens not come back to win the game afterwards.
Yeah, I think we were talking in DMs, and I said it had gone from jubilation to misery if they had been successful in that 2-point conversion. Because, they had to battle, so hard to get back in that game, and then they get a lead, and then, the Bengals, go over the top of their heads and take it back. And it's just this back and forth fourth quarter. And you kind of could feel as the Bengals got the ball back in that last possession and they're driving, like, hey, if they score, they're probably going to go for 2. You could just kind of feel it. And so everything was kind of building up to that. And then, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about the calls, the missed calls, the non-calls, depending on your perspective. So there's just a lot of drama in that whole situation. But hey, you know what? Something I was telling another friend of mine, every other NFL fan base who was on that end of those calls or non-calls, whatever you want to call it, would take that every day of the week. So, I get it. But, hey, it's a good thing for the Ravens and for Ravens fans. So, we'll take it.
There you go. Big news for the defense in this game. I would say the biggest piece of news was the return of Travis Jones he'd been active. He didn't play the week before, which I think turned out to be good because he certainly looked like he's pushing off that leg just fine. Even when he had been active, he hadn't really been contributing at all to the pass rush in the way that Travis Jones is supposed to, which really hurt the team as they rolled up a 57% ATS rate last week. The week before, it was high as well as in the 40s. The week before that, even when he's hurt against the game against Tampa, they got almost no pressure from the interior defensive line after Pierce left the game. And he played 2 more snaps, I believe, of those played 2 snaps in the fourth quarter. I can put it that way. And the Tampa ran like 30 plays in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So it really didn't make any sense. Anyway, since Travis Jones has been out, nothing done in terms of generating pressure, a whole bunch of ample time and space pockets given to the opposing quarterbacks. And that's led to some very bad outcomes, including the results we've seen these last 3 weeks. Anyway, your thoughts on what Travis Jones has provided to this pass rush coming back?
Well, obviously there's what he brings as an individual player. Mm-hmm. Big, powerful, athletic, strong man, right? And we've really kind of seen him take another step, really in his overall game, but I'd say particularly as a pass rusher this year. I mean, the development of that Reggie White hump move's just been just amazing. Like when he was healthy, it was such an effective move, right? Where he can kind of get one arm up under a guy's armpit and literally just toss him to the side and get in the backfield. You know me, man, I hate to get like super nerdy right off the bat, but something I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly with Travis Jones. And I think I had shared it with a couple of people on Twitter where I said, well, look, something that I had kind of noticed that's happening, probably not just with the Ravens, but of course that's who we focus on the most. But when you look at how opposing pass protection units were approaching them, right? So when Travis Jones was healthy, teams chipping on edge rushers, pretty standard, right? See that pretty much across the league everywhere, whether it's a running back, whether it's a tight end, whatever it is, wide receiver coming down, you're getting a lot of chip help on those guys, particularly on obvious passing down, straight drop back. We're not talking about play action or anything like that, because obviously there's some different blocking components with play action pass, but straight drop back. So you're effectively getting what amounts to a double team on your edge rushers, right? So now that leaves your interior guys. Typically, they're going to help on one of the 2 interior guys. This is assuming a 4-man rush, by the way. I should have set that up. Mm-hmm. Typically, they're going to help on one of the 2 interior guys, the center and the guard, are going to both be on that guy or the guard in the center, however you want to look at it, right? So then that leaves one interior guy with a one-on-one. Now, when that's Madubuike and Travis Jones on the inside, pick your poison, right?
Yep.
Which one of those guys you want to leave with the one-on-one? It's probably not going to be a good situation if you do that too often. He goes out. Now you're leaving guys, and no shade to these guys, just throwing out names. You're leaving guys like Broderick Washington. You're leaving guys like Josh Wormley, they just brought back, recently with that one-on-one. And those guys just aren't going to win those one-on-ones as consistently as Travis Jones or Justin Madubuike, right? It's just a fact. And so him coming back, now that opens all of that back up. And I think we'll probably get into that at some point during this episode, but you could see how many one-on-ones, whether it was Madubuike, which it seemed like most of the time they were kind of going away from him as the game went on. I think he was getting that those sort of two guys on the interior early on, but then they started going to Jones and they were leaving Madubuike with all these one-on-ones.
Right.
And it clearly, we saw the results of that.
I think kind of the natural standard is you go to the larger, more powerful man anyway. So even if it's Michael Pierce or Jones, and Pierce is like Jones light now. It used to be he was the guy. Beginning of last year, Pierce was the Jones at that point. And then they switched as the year evolved. They switched it to the big third down pairing, the big passing down pairing being Jones and Madubuike. And he can just do things physically that the rest of them can't. Yeah. Brent Urban, when he's on the show, mentioned that he's the guy who can cross the guard's face and go one arm into that center. And Urban is a big leverage guy, a very long guy, and loves to play with two hands. Loves to play with one hand longer than two also, but he can't do it right crossing the face and hitting a 300-pound center that way. He has to go with two hands first and then transfer to one. And he said Travis Jones is a guy who could do that, and he could go one arm directly. I think it's you've hit on almost all this, okay, but I think it is such a waterfall that develops because you got the double team that you typically generate on Jones in the inside. Madubuike really needs solos to be a super effective pass rusher, and to extent everybody does. It's very rare. Sam Adams, Pernell McPhee, that you get players who truly excel at beating doubles. They're super rare, and they're incredibly valuable players. But when you start with needing a double team on him, then Madubuike gets a single. Then you've got more pick your poison on the outside because you mentioned the chip blocks, but you have to make a choice of eligible receiver contribution if you want to do anything against Van Noy and Oweh, who are both damn good pass rushers one-on-one on their own. And when Oweh is facing Cody Ford on this game, you got a good matchup.
Yeah, you're right. Waterfall effect. It definitely cascades when you have Jones and Madubuike in there because, like you said, you got to make choices. And, it maybe didn't manifest itself as much in this game, but when, opponents get into a situation like where they're trailing, maybe Broncos game's a better example. Now, Jones wasn't healthy in that game, but just the situation is kind of what I'm describing. When they're trailing and they're in obvious drop back pass situations, when you have those two guys healthy on the inside, now you got to get those, you're trying to get out as many eligible receivers as possible because, you're in, hey, we got to pass first mode. We got times working against us and the score. So you don't, maybe have those guys chip as much and you just get them out immediately. Now you got more one-on-ones. You've got maybe two one-on-ones on the outside, on the edges, or you got at least one on the edge and you got one on the inside. So, if you're, the defensive pass rush unit, obviously you're trying to create as many one-on-ones as you can. So, the more you can do that, the better opportunity is going to be for your guys. And we saw those guys kind of start to crank it up and get after it in that Broncos game as it went on when they got more of those, pure drop back, pure rush opportunities. So that's the ideal world. And when you got those two healthy big dudes inside, you can really do that. Yeah,
that Broncos game, very bad for the pass rush overall, giving up 58% ample time and space in that game. And this is one of the things I've been tracking all year is just trying to divide kind of the blame for what's happened in the passing game between the pass rush and the secondary. And I admit there's some hard to do things about that because they're very intertwined, like pitching and fielding are in terms of trying to separate the thing. But at least in terms of the ample time and space, BOQ and pressure component, I've come up with this expected yardage thing I've got that is pretty good. I'll tell you, I think it tells a part of the story at least. And this is just the Ravens secondary has been letting down the pass rush relative to expectation almost every single game. The big exception was the Denver game where Bo Nix missed a few throws and he came up well short, 50 yards or so, I think it was, short of his expectation. But Burrow's been over by 140 in the first game. I think it was 94 in the second game here. Just ridiculous amounts. And then we look at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson in the Denver game was 8.0 yards per play better than his expectation for his opportunity set. 8.0. Let's think about that for a second.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. He's, I mean, people talked about it all season long. I know you have. You've heard national pundits talk about it too, right? 2-time MVP. He's probably playing better now than he did during both of those MVP seasons. And I think we maybe have even mentioned it on the show once or twice, maybe years ago. Like, but where's the ceiling for this guy? Like every time you think you know what the ceiling is for this guy, if he can get in the right set of circumstances in terms of supporting cast and other things around him, he seems to consistently finds ways to elevate his own individual game. And I don't know where the ceiling is. I'm glad that I have to even ask myself that question. When that's your cool quarterback, that's a great thing to have to wonder about. So the stuff he's doing this year is amazing. And I think that's why there's so much concern and consternation about the defense, because they're like, please don't waste this.
All right. So some other things they did different in this game, and maybe this relates in some way to what we were talking about with Madubuike and Jones, is they've gone to this buddy system. And they do it on the interior defensive line, but they also do it at the outside linebacker position now. Kind of a weird move. Are you surprised at all by the Ngakoue release relative to and keeping Ojabo after they healthy scratched him a couple times?
Surprised in that he's a pass rusher, and it can be hard to find those guys in the middle of the season. Granted, he was out there on the street, I believe, before they signed him.
Yep.
So that probably said something. Now that was earlier in the year. I want to say that was back in September. So, we've had a few weeks of games and team needs change over that time, injuries and such. So a little bit surprised from that standpoint. But just from sort of the performance standpoint, not really, because I was like, I don't know, having an opportunity to see him these last, I guess it's 2 games now where, right before the Bengals game where Ojabo was healthy scratch. Was it 2 or just 1?
2.
It was 2. And I'm watching Yannick and I'm like, I just don't know that there's a huge difference right now at this point. Probably, maybe
that's not a good thing to say about either of them.
Yeah, I know. At this point in his career, Yannick, he's a one move rusher, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. TJ Watt is essentially a one move rusher, but it's a very, very good move, right? He's super effective with it. But that cross chop, it's just guys are sitting on it, they're catching it. It just, I don't think that he has the burst and explosion or the twitch that he used to have in his younger days. And so it's just not as effective as it used to be. Ojabo, when he was in there, like you said, not a good thing to say what I said about Ngakoue in this context. There would at least be, and I guess flash is the wrong word. I heard some guy say this on a show the other day, a flicker, right? You can call them flashes. They're flickers, right? Where you'll see a play where, he'll have a good rush. He'll get close to the quarterback, right? This is almost like this almost thing that I see a lot of people talk about with Oweh, right? Almost. Now he doesn't have that happen nearly as much as Oweh has. Obviously, Oweh has taken big strides in that in terms of consistency. But Ojabo will have 1 or 2 of those flickers a game, and you're like, okay, there's something in there, but it's just not consistent enough right now to really count on it. I mean, you can see Tavius Robinson is essentially past him, I think, in terms of performance on the field. At least in terms of consistency. So, not ideal. We haven't really seen Isaac, Adisa Isaac in any kind of significant role. Maybe that's something they look at in the coming weeks. I don't know. Or maybe Ojabo can get it going in the same way that Tavius Robinson has kind of picked it up. You never know with these young guys, man. Like it clicks when it clicks. It's just hard to know sometimes, and then sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, that's an outcome too.
But I don't know why this was an important. I don't know why it's been a difficult decision to deal with Ojabo at this point. First of all, they could have tried to trade him, and that would not have been an unreasonable thing to try and do. And in fact, Voss and I have discussed Ojabo for Clowney straight up. It's not a big salary difference. It's a extra. You're basically trading a year and a half of Ojabo for a half a year of Clowney, which seems like you're getting used in that deal because, well, I typically I would want the younger player in that arrangement, but I'm not. Expectations of ceiling and floor for Ajabo are both way down from where they were the night he was drafted. So
for sure from that time. Yeah. See, I just haven't gotten to that point yet. I think there's still something in there. I know you can't wait on this stuff forever, but I don't know, man. You know me. I tend to hold on to guys. I mean, we take these discussions all the way back to James Hurst, right? I'll hold on to guys forever. that's just how I am. But I have the luxury of doing that because I'm a fan, right? I don't have those jobs that Eric DaCosta and the coaches have. So, I don't have any skin in the game. So it's easy for me to say that. But yeah, I'm still holding out hope, right? That there'll be something there. And that just tends to be my default, that I hold on to guys to longer than I probably should. But it's me. What can I say?
All right. I want to go back to the buddy system for a moment, because Jones and Madubuike are playing together, and we've talked a little bit about the value of that. And then they're playing Broderick Washington with Tupou. And that obviously is a B team. All right.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing at outside linebacker, that they're really pairing up Oweh and Van Noy snaps on obvious passing situations. And then they've got Tavius Robinson in there with Ajabo. Tavius Robinson had been very good playing in some rush packages. They put in 3 outside linebacker packages, nickel or dime, where they put him on the field on the inside when they're really short on 2 interior defensive linemen. Do you think they're doing a disservice to him at all to pair him with Ajabo?
I guess currently, yes. The way Ajabo has been playing, I think currently the answer would probably have to be yes to a certain extent. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know the reasons why they've paired guys up the way that they've paired them up. I like when he get with Tavius. I mean, I like when he gets some of those opportunities to rush inside. I think that's a really kind of effective thing for him. I like when they do it with Oweh. Like, there's a couple guys where I'm like, it's not the go-to, right? It's not the thing that you maybe necessarily want them doing a ton of, right? There have been other guys in Ravens history who you love to see doing that, like, a lot. They're maybe not necessarily the guys like you want to see doing a ton of that. But I think when they get, a few opportunities a game in there, it's a nice change of pace. They can be a handful for a guard to handle in terms of their quickness and their length. So I think that, and then particularly in any type of rush games, with their movement ability, when you get those guys looping inside in particular. So They don't start out aligned inside, but they're still ending up as an inside rusher. I think that's had some effectiveness too. And just in terms of breaking pockets, maybe you don't necessarily always get to the QB, but you break the pocket and you force him to get off of his spot, which is a whole nother problem for the secondary to handle. But anyway, I'd probably like to see some more of that. But yeah, I think they're searching right now for that. Let's call them the B team. Not trying to say it in a derogatory way, but just to give it a label. They're searching for somebody opposite right now. Robinson in that pairing, who can be effective. Because like I said, I think he's raised his level of play recently, and they're trying to find somebody to kind of complement that.
The health of Jones makes it unlikely, I think, that the Ravens are going to go back on obvious passing downs to an interior rush pack, to a outside linebacker kicked inside. Yeah. I don't see that as a real option right now. When you've got Jones and Madubuike there, you're going to want to use that every single time you have the option to do it. If you were completely busted up and basically defending in the second half, where you wanted to have a dime defense or a rush nickel out there every single snap of a second half where you had a big lead, it's obviously not as important in terms of win probability. But then you could get a lot of snaps out of Robinson in a game, pair him with Washington or something on the inside, and not be too concerned about the run game beating you at that point if you got a 3 or 4 touchdown lead. But then you're not playing for a lot of win probability when you do that. You're just playing to get snaps for Robinson and see what he can do from the inside.
Yeah, and you would know this better than me because you track and chart all this stuff. But they'll still have, I don't know, 1, 2, maybe 3 defensive fronts a game where they'll put Madubuike at end. I think in this game we saw Broderick Washington at end. It's not. It's they don't major in it, right? But it's something that they'll mix in every now and then because it's, they got some kind of special game or something that they're running off of it that they designed. So mix some of that in a little bit. I know Denard Melton, who I think you had on the show not too long ago, he loves seeing Madubuike at defensive end. Loves it.
I want to say this last game they had Travis Jones at defensive end for one play.
Yeah,
I'd have to go back and look at it, but I think it might have been my mistake. It might have been Washington or something, but it was one of those two. It wasn't Madubuike because. Anyway, Yeah, I always like to see that. I always like to see special ways to line up a guy off ball and whatnot. Guess we got to keep going here a little bit. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. They really battered Burrow in this game. I thought the physical beating they gave him was one of the things I really liked about it. But Burrow coming out of the game, I can't imagine he got up feeling good today. I think he'd be hurting. And when you're dealing with opposing quarterbacks, that's what you want them to feel after they play you. So anyway, it looked like he had problems, lifting that helmet with his left arm. So I think he probably has got some issues with that. He's had all kinds of hand and wrist issues, which he's been on the injury report for before. I didn't know whether they were throwing arm issues or hand issues. But the one thing I saw from Burrow in this game that is cause for concern, we'll get into the next point, is that Burrow did not have any fear of throwing deep against this defense. And that is very different from the last couple of years against the Ravens. He's just not one to throw into the teeth of cover two at all. He said all this quick slanty outside passing game, get the ball away from the middle of the field that they've done down after down after down, ton of BOQ throws. This game, he was happy to get back there in the pocket and try and loft it up for Chase or Burton or whoever it might have been, even though they didn't have their full complement of people.
Yeah, I think, you could even go back to that first game and clearly they feel like they can go over the top of the Ravens safeties, whether that's Marcus Williams, whether that's Eddie Jackson, whoever's back there. I think they feel like they can get behind them and they can throw the ball over their heads. So that's to the point that you just made, very different from what we had seen in 2023 in particular, maybe even going back to 2022 a little bit.
22 and 23, both those years were big outside years. Yeah.
But, put yourself in the Bengals shoes, right? Like I said, they saw it in the first game and then you've seen it in the game since. Like, hey, why not? Why wouldn't we try to go over the top of these guys' heads? They've not shown any consistent ability to defend it. So why wouldn't we do it? As I went back and I watched the defense today, I'm watching the first half and I'm like, okay, for the most part, I kind of like what we're doing, right? We didn't have any of those plays really in the first half, right? The real big bombs came in the second half. They're kind of forcing him to go down underneath. Now, some of these underneath plays, it's a guy catching it, check down area. So let's say he's maybe, 3 to 4 to 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, but they've gotten so much depth in their coverage to try to take away the deep stuff that there's nobody within 5 to 7 yards of this guy when he catches the ball. And so now they've got some yak opportunity, which also created some missed tackles opportunities because these guys are in more space now. But I was okay with that because I'm saying, hey, keep it all in front of you. You're going to give up some stuff. Bend but don't break. Hey, I can live with that as opposed to, bombs over Baghdad, touchdowns, flying all over the place. But then it got a little leaky in the second half. Little is probably an understatement. So yeah, it's that part has been tough to really wrap my mind around. I've really spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, particularly with the secondary and the safeties, especially like what is going on with a guy like Marcus Williams? Because I'm just like, is it injury? Is there something that we don't know about where he's playing through it? Or because it has been a precipitous drop.
It's
I'm just
unreal.
Like, I just can't. It stumps me. I'm literally stumped by it.
So, to a lesser degree, Roquan has shown some step backs. I think he's playing heavier this year. He's still a very good tackler, but he doesn't have the same ability to track or even drag a seam the way he used to. We saw Ray Lewis get to this point in this town where, he was still understood what the quarterback was trying to accomplish and could get in the way by getting in a passing lane, but he didn't have any ability to cover anymore at all. Yeah. And, when that's gone, it's gone. I certainly hope that Roquan hasn't put himself in a position physically where he can't reshape his body this next offseason to kind of fine tune where he wants to be as a linebacker. Because I think the Ravens need him to be a better cover guy. I mean, they're going to always have coverage responsibilities for him. I presume he'll still have the green dot next year. The only other guy who can even really have it is Hamilton. I think Roquan makes more sense for a lot of reasons, but he's got to be able to make a contribution in pass defense.
He's another one where the change from 2023 to this year is pretty stark. And again, you're looking for explanations, you're trying to figure it out. And it's just, if you could point to one thing, oh, that's the problem. Okay, or even two things, one or two things. Those are the problems. We can fix those. You'd feel better about that at least. There's still problems, but you'd feel better about it. But for me, I'm like, it's a number of things on a number of different levels. And it's hard to solve a situation like that when there's multiple issues and multiple problems. I don't play golf as much as I used to, but a friend of mine, when I used to play a lot, would say, "Oh, we're playing military golf out here today, right? Left, right, left, right. The ball's going left, it's going right, it's going left." And he's like, if you've got one problem to fix in your golf swing, you can deal with that, right? You can say, okay, it's consistently going right. Let me do this to, make sure that the ball, I'm going to start out a little bit more left and I'll let it just kind of go back to the right. I can deal with that. But when you don't know whether it's going left or right, it's very hard to play. So when you've got multiple problems like this, I was just telling somebody earlier today, it might've been Coach Evans. I was like, there's multiple busts in coverage in terms of missed assignments throughout the game. So it's hard to even know what's supposed to be happening because there's so many breakdowns.
All right. Well, the Ravens are here at a mini bye right now. They've got two chances really to make wholesale changes or make a significant change, I'll say, because I don't think it'll be wholesale changes. I think it'll be like one significant change. And it could be a lot of things in my mind. It could be a coaching change. I would not put that past the Ravens at this point. And it doesn't mean that Zach Orr is not going to be the play caller or whatever. It'd be some shift in responsibilities for Orr, some additional person who's responsibility for a subcomponent of what the defense does. I don't think it's going to be, three more ex-coordinators coming in and all be chirping in his ear at the same time. But I do think, they could decide that Dean Pease isn't the guy to be sitting in that chair and do that. I was very interested, by the way, in what did you make of that very highly animated visage of Dean Pease in the booth on that final Bengals drive?
I saw you were going to ask me about this, and I have to sadly admit I didn't actually see it.
Oh, you didn't see the broadcast? Okay.
No, I didn't. Well, I didn't see that particular part of it.
Let me describe it as best I can, because they were trying to lip read. Basically, it looked like the whoever, I don't know who was calling the ex-quarterback who's calling the game.
The Herbstreit? Kirk Herbstreit?
Yes, I guess it was Herbstreit.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was Gannon. I don't know why, but anyway, Herbstreit said, look at him. He's telling him, get after Burrow here. Is a very staid pass rush in this game, almost all four-man rush. We'll get to that in a little bit. But beyond that, they almost used no deception. When they used deception, it was very effective. When they used numbers, it was very effective. But they used almost exclusively the four-man, plain vanilla 4-0 or 4-1 rush, where the 4-1 rush was almost always Smith at the line of scrimmage dropping into coverage there, being the one is the number of that drop from the line of scrimmage, that simulated pressure look. And I don't even really consider it simulated pressure until there's two or more. But they looked into the booth and they said, he's telling them, get after Burrow. And basically, if Dean Pease is the one telling you, increase your aggressiveness and get after Burrow here, we got a problem, because Dean Pease is the least aggressive coordinator probably the Ravens have ever had in terms of really going after the quarterback with numbers or scheme. I mean, if you want somebody who really, really will ratchet up the pressure, the boiling point very quickly, it'd be Rex Ryan or it'd be Wink Martindale. They're the two. But not Dean Pease. He was a very much bend but not break defense.
Yeah, that's got to be a real tough situation for Zach, and that's kind of the thing that I thought about with him. Obviously, I want this to go well for him. Young guy, sure. Raven for life type of guy, but it's like, well, what do I do? You know what I mean? I can't count on anything. It's like we were saying earlier, like if it was one or two things, if it was, hey, just bring more pressure, right? We're better when I bring more pressure. That's how we're going to get through this. That's how we're going to get off the field. Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes, and then other times they have breakdowns when they do that. So I think it's like, well, what do I do? What can I really go to? What's typically you want to have at least one thing that you feel like you can hang your hat on as a coach, as a play caller. Okay, this is what we do well. I know whenever anything else is going on, I've even heard Ray and Ed talk about this. back in the day when maybe they were having some rough patches throughout a game. There's like one call, one defensive call. Everybody knew it. We knew it in our sleep, inside it out. We go to it, and we're gonna, we're gonna have a good down. But what can you say that about right now with this version of the Ravens defense? So it's got to be really tough right now when you feel like I want to have that one thing that I feel like we can really hang our hat on and everybody knows it and is going to execute it consistently. But I think Marlon Humphreys talked about the last 2 games. It's like 10 guys will do what they're supposed to and 1 guy won't.
Right.
And that 1 guy changes, but it's like on every play. There's at least 1 person not doing what they're supposed to do. So it's just really tough to be in that situation as a play caller.
It was a lot easier to deal with it when it was just Patrick Queen. I mean, it's just then you'd at least know where the problem was going to be. You talk to him after the play. I'm sure it seemed like nagging after a while. Okay, so the big question I have is here: Brandon Stephens has been playing like crap. I mean, I don't think there's any debating that at this point. His inability to turn for the ball and find it, even though he made an interception, a short period interception there that lasted until the review. In man coverage, turning back for the ball was good. A lot of times he's been very sticky in man coverage, but the whole league is onto him now in terms of the back shoulder throw and the ability to, if when your receiver's turning, to throw a fastball and it's a completion. And that's just been very tough. Is it time to move Stephens? And with the Ravens' weakness at safety, would that be a logical place to try and move him to?
Well, obviously he's played safety before. Primarily played safety, right, when they first drafted him. And then, they moved him to corner, 2022?
22, he finished the year there. 23, he played the whole year there, played almost every snap. And then obviously 24, he's played there.
Yeah. And he certainly has not had a good year, certainly not up to the standard that he set last year. In his defense, I will say there have been some occasions where he's been undressed by a safety or a linebacker at times where he's supposed to have help and it ain't there. Right. So that can make your job, a little harder as a corner. It can make, if you're already not playing well, can make it look even worse. But I think they have a lot of stand-up guys in that secondary. He's certainly that kind of guy. That's the way he seems to conduct himself. He's not going to throw anybody else under the bus or try to point blame in those situations. Now, the specific examples you gave, back shoulders and that kind of like ISO one-on-one stuff. Hey, that's you. Can't blame anybody else for that, right? That's you and the wide receiver. And I like what Hamilton said about him a couple of weeks ago, where he's like, he's one of the better technical corners in the league. Because I think that's true. And I think that shows up in terms of that stickiness of coverage, right? In terms of just being in the right position, playing with the correct leverage, being where you're supposed to be on the receiver. But that inability to kind of find the ball has just been the death knell. And it's kind of always been that way with him, even at safety. Where you're not going to see him in one-on-one man coverage as often, but when he was in those situations, same type of thing, right? We'd hear people say that all the time. Oh, he's right there. How come he can't make a play on the ball? And you would think from a DB perspective, if I'm allowing the back shoulder throw, like I'm taking the deep ball away, I'm taking any kind of in cut away. The only thing I'm giving him was a back shoulder. Hypothetically, that's a low percentage throw, right? Compared to those other types of throws. But when they're having the consistent success with those type of throws that teams have had against him this year, then it's a little bit harder to look at it that way. So I get the technical part of it that Hamilton was talking about. Like he's really doing the things in terms of positioning and forcing certain types of throws that you'd want to see from a corner, but they're completing them. So that's the downside. So that's my filibustering way of saying, I don't really know, but I don't think there's anything that's off the table at this point because of how much they've struggled in the secondary. So you've sat guys down for a game, right? Starters, made them inactive for a game. Maybe you try this move. Maybe you're moving back to safety for a game and you give Wiggins a full game at corner and Marlon opposite him, and then whatever you want to do in the nickel. Maybe you try that for a game. You tried everything else. So, what the hell? I mean, I wish I had a better answer for it than that, but it's just like all options are on the table at this point.
Marlon's been a good slot corner. I don't think Mollett gives him nearly the same value at slot that you get with Humphrey, obviously. So it'd be a shame if they can't go with their big three of Stephens, Wiggins, and Humphrey when they really have big passing downs where they want to defend. But at this point, I don't think Stephens is one of the guys. This is how desperate I've become in my thought process. I mean, Tre'Davious White was terrible this year in his playing time. He's had multiple injuries the last couple of years. We're at a point where there's very strong evidence that Tre'Davious White is probably done. And yet I'm now considering, does he have to be part of the solution? Could he play safety? These are the kind of things that are running through my head, whether he's corner or safety. Could he help the Ravens at either of those positions? Even if it's on a rotational basis, maybe. It's getting to be very scary in terms of what they've got. I want to toss out a couple questions here.
I think he could help, actually, by the way, because I actually watched all of his snaps with the Rams. I only played 4 games, and he was healthy and active for a number of games. I didn't think it was that bad, to be honest with you. He gave up some. He had when he had some losses, he had some bad losses. The double move to Jameson Williams, that's just a clear L, right, for a long touchdown. There was one in the 49ers game where it's like a fake toss, misdirection kind of play. He's got his eyes in the backfield. His guy runs right behind him, wide open in the touchdown. I think it was wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. I think it was Jennings. And then he had a couple of other balls where, ironically enough, we're talking about Stevens. He's in good position, but doesn't find the ball, and the ball gets completed on him. But there weren't a ton of plays when I went through there when I was like, oh, this guy is toast. I really didn't see that. He's not the athlete that he was, for sure. He's certainly he's closer to the back 9 than the front 9, for sure. But could
16th hole.
Yeah, we might 19th hole, right? Maybe, I don't know. But I think that there's still something there, depending on how you use him and the volume, right? And situational use, how much you want him to play and when you want him to play. I think you can still get something out of him, but you're going to have to be pretty specific about that, at least to start, unless he can show more, right? If you get him out there and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is better than we thought it was. We thought, this guy was maybe done. This is actually not that bad. But other than that, I think, you have to be pretty selective about it. But again, like we were just saying, if we're this desperate, why wouldn't that be on the table too?
It would absolutely be on the table. And getting him more snaps in practice is probably the first step towards figuring out what the guy has. Then getting him on the field and seeing that. I understand your general nature as a very nice human being. And I think you are at times overly kind to the player. You like don't want to criticize a player. I find that to be true about you, Mike. And I don't want to.
Yeah, I've been told that before. But you know what? I think it's because my mindset is it's about guys playing, right?
Okay.
It's easier to criticize and say what they can't do, but they got to play. So I need to know what they can do. Okay. Can't do is not something I can line up on the field. I need to find out what he can do and try to put him in those situations so he can help the team. So I think that's always my mindset. Obviously, there are things that guys aren't as good at and need to improve on, or maybe are at a point in their career where they can improve. Could be a physical thing, whatever. Right. I accept that. I really do understand that. But I think my default has always been and probably always will be, I have to think about it in terms of what they can do, because if you brought him here to play. Right. And we got to figure out how we can make that happen.
They basically, not only they trade nothing for him, they actually may get net draft capital out of it, I believe, based on the 2 years. I mean, they're trading a 7 year ahead. So they're going to, in a theory, they'll always lose a little bit of net draft capital, but it could be actually a higher pick they get a year deferred. But the thing about this is that White had I would.
This holiday season, find the perfect gift and spark something special with Uncommon Goods. No need to stress. Uncommon Goods makes shopping easy with hand-picked, unique gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Think gifts that bring out the smiles, the laughter, and that, yes, it's exactly what I wanted moment. They scour the globe for one-of-a-kind, handmade, remarkable items, and they always seem to know the perfect gift. I got these Camden Yards drinking glasses on it that have a nice etch of Oriole Park and the skyline around it. Check out their new officially licensed NFL collection for you Raven fans. When you shop Uncommon Goods, you're supporting small businesses and independent artists. Many of the products are made in small batches, so make sure to get yours before they sell out. With meaningful gifts from personalized items to special finds for kids, sports fans, and book lovers, Uncommon Goods has something for everyone. Plus, for every purchase, they donate $1 to a nonprofit. Over $3 million donated so far. To get your 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/ravens. That's uncommongoods.com/ravens for 15% off. Hurry, this deal won't last. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary.
I want to get in the position, let's put it this way, where I looked at, but if you just take out the 70-yard play and the 65-yard play, I mean, we start doing that against this game against the Bengals, we're missing where the real problem is. You can't take away the 70 or the 67-yard play. Yes, they have a huge impact on Burrow's overall day and how much he beat his expectation or how much of a contribution the secondary lost. And you're going to say, well, it's just the two guys who blew those plays. Well, yeah, within a larger context, I don't think that's true. I mean, I think that it has too much risk of beating again. And White had been undeniably very bad with this in his time with the Rams, way worse than Marcus Peters had been when he got here. Marcus Peters was around 9.3 yards per target. White is up at 11.6 yards per target, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think Marcus Peters might have been 2-2 when they acquired him. Now nobody's expecting that he's going to turn into an all-pro in his first year with the Ravens, the way that Marcus Peters did.
Right.
But even if you to have a player who might get on the field, I think I'd like to have a player who's ahead of JAD, who can earn his way ahead of JAD on the pecking order. That's what I want. Yeah, I'm not sure he's that guy.
Yeah, see, we'll agree to disagree because when I look at the film, I just don't think it's that bad. I'm not saying you take those plays out. I'm saying look at them in context and say, yes, is a double move touchdown, a long double move touchdown, a bad thing? Absolutely it is. Does it happen to every corner in the NFL? Yes, it does, right? Is it more likely to happen to a guy who's a little bit older and coming off of an ACL or an Achilles, whatever his injury is? Probably, especially in the context of the reporting that I read from Jordan Roderick, who covers the Rams, says, look, the plan was never to play him early on, right? They were still trying to gradually let him get back from that Achilles or that ACL injury. But then they had other injuries at corner, and he basically had to play a full snap load before they felt like, from a health standpoint, he was completely ready for it. And I think it showed at times. So is he going to come in here and be some kind of savior? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. But could there be more that meets the eye and something that could actually help you out a little bit when you've got, a really bad situation that's been going on for most of this season in your secondary? I think there's an opportunity that could happen. Now, if he comes in and it proves to be what you've described and he's complete garbage, I'll be the first one to say I was wrong. But I just think that there could be something there if he's healthy. I think that there could be something there.
I'm not ruling it out, but I'm down at 10 or 12 or 15% that he could turn it around and be good. The transience of injury at his age is not something I want to depend on for my hope.
Yeah, it's low probability for sure. Yeah. It's low probability.
But I really hope you're right. I really hope you're right, man. And I do also appreciate you talking through it in a way that gets at real world elements. So I do like that. Let's move on a little bit because we've got some other things to do. And let's turn it around and say, what is this defense really doing well? We know a lot of things that are not going well for this defense, but the Ravens have continued to stop the run effectively. The missed tackles spiked a little bit in this game. They're at 15.4%. Ravens, this is one thing that I think Orr has to be credited for properly, is he's turned this into a very good tackling team. And they were not nearly that last year when they had a 13% missed tackle rate. They're down 10.2% right now through 10 games, which is not a minimal sample. If you look at PFF grades, they're by far the best tackling team. If you look at the missed tackle rates, again, using PFF numbers, which at least I know they're collected similarly, they're the lowest in terms of missed tackle rate. Still a very positive thing that I want to credit Orr with. I want to make sure we're understanding what are the things that Zach is giving this defense. And that's certainly one of them.
Yeah, lines up too, right? With former linebacker, right? Having his unit be a good tackling unit and stopping the run, right? It makes a lot of sense when your play caller is a former linebacker. Some of the stuff in the secondary we've already talked about. We get it. But yeah, I think they've been, I don't know if they're still at the top of the league in run defense, but I know they're really near the top if they're not at the top. They've been really, really good and really consistent in that area. And like you said, the tackling, that's a huge thing because was it 23 or 22? There was one year not too long ago where it's like we were talking about that like almost every week, how many tackles they were missing on defense. So yeah, that's very important to point out because as Bill Belichick always says, right, at a certain point, it comes down to blocking and tackling, right? That's what it comes down to. Despite all of the cool schemes and all of the real, unique stuff that you can do on defense and offense, you got to block and you got to tackle.
Yeah, I there's this team in general. I mean, in a certain sense, I kind of like where they are as a team. I don't entirely subscribe to the notion that the problems are so deep and intertwined that you can't possibly fix them. I think they are actually modestly limited. I think that if you replace both the safeties, you could be in a place, and they can't do that during the season. They missed their chance to trade for a safety and get it done. So if they're going to replace him, they've got to do it by the switch the cars around in the parking lot method, using their own cars that are there now. But this is a team that will have 2 new safeties in 2025 because Williams ain't going to be here and Eddie Jackson ain't going to be here. And neither Kane nor Braid is the answer on the back end. I'll just toss that out there right now. I didn't see anything in their college play that would suggest it. Maybe I'd like to hear your opinion on that, by the way. And I didn't see anything in the preseason play that would come close to suggesting it. All of their good plays were downhill, run fit kind of plays. So it makes them both perfectly fine dime candidates, but not the guys you want on the back end. Darius Washington, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I think they drafted those guys in that profile, in that mold, right? Going back, Chuck Clark, name your guy, right? Where they picked that guy to kind of be in that mold, in that role. And I agree with you that's kind of where those guys are right now. Getting their young guys, could they develop into more? Chuck certainly developed into more.
Yep.
In some ways, sure, it can happen, but typically that tends to be the exception more than the rule, right? And what's the thing that Parcells used to always say: if you start making a bunch of exceptions, soon you got a team full of exceptions. Right. So, yeah, I don't want to make it sound like no, okay, this one's going to be different because typically that's not the case. But I agree with you that that's kind of the mold that those guys are in.
At the root of this team, though, wouldn't you agree? The core talent at the skill positions on offense is the highest it's ever been for the Ravens. The highest it's ever been by far. The quarterback is playing as well, at least, as he ever has before, and probably even better than in 2019. Although that is almost sacrilege in terms. What he did in 2019 with a group of guys around him in skill positions who weren't very good was exceptional. Of course, he did have a great offensive line then.
Yeah,
and this is not a great offensive line, so they still have some movement to do, but this has been an organization, I hope, that has not lost its core cultural ability to develop offensive linemen with the loss of Joe D.
Yeah.
So we hope it's not, it's that was the whole glue and string and putty holding everything together. I don't think it was. I think they know how to look at linemen in a way that'll give them value, and I think they know how to develop them too. And I hope that a lot of that, and people like Travell Wharton have picked up on that working with Joe D for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of an institutional thing, probably. Not to discount anything that Joe D did, because he was a very important part of it, obviously. But yeah, I think some of that is sort of institutionalized, their ability to identify those guys and develop those guys. It's just kind of an organizational thing. On offense and defense, right? They have their positions, right, on offense and defense that they've always been able to identify and develop. And so I think that'll continue. Could that player look a little different than maybe they have in the past? Maybe. Certainly Tyler Linderbaum, right? Not that he's in that developmental category. He's not, but obviously, a little different.
He was between year 1 and year 2.
Yeah, a little different.
And he really developed. Yeah.
Right. Than the guys that they had in recent years play center, just physically. So yeah, you just never know, but I lean towards trusting their ability to do that, right? Despite what's happening on certain parts of the team, whether it's the O-line. And I know for a time people were pretty down on certain guys on the O-line, and maybe they've got at least up to a passable level of play in some people's minds. But defense, yeah, you're right. There's going to be changes for sure at safety next year, and maybe in some other spots too.
Yeah, it's they've they've got a couple of big holes they're going to be filling this next year, because I think just dollar wise they have some fairly obvious cuts they have to make, unfortunately. And I'm sorry to say that it's probably the end of Mark Andrews in Baltimore. That he's been an incredible, wonderful player, but he's got a big cap hit next year, and the Ravens have a bunch of young guys they need to sign. And I'm afraid if they go out and they go for a big contract, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to get some pass rusher, some high value receiver, or this or that. It's going to be, I made the comparison this week that I think it'll be like Yoko Ono breaking up the Beatles, because they've got an incredible core of young talent. The offense, it's all there. Don't screw with it, damn it, in terms of the skill position players, and improve the offensive line. And I think that's the only track you really need to run on. Will be a big decision, by the way, in terms of dollars spent on Ronnie Stanley or not. But on the defense, they've got a whole core of young players there too. And a bunch of them are coming up on the point where you can make an early offer that will divide benefit. And a bunch of players this applies to. Ardarius Washington might be in that group. I haven't mentioned that name before, but this is the end of his third year, and he might be a guy that could get cheap. Yeah. And they should try and do it. Daniel Fa'alele, as ridiculous as it's going to sound to some people, might be that guy. If he's the end of your roster, is that bad? If he's your starting guard, it's great. So you maybe find a way to sign him. But then there's players who are unbelievably in this category, like Likely and Jones, Owe, Tyler Linderbaum, because you have to sign him this year if you're going to sign him early. You can't give him the 5th year option. Yeah, it'd be too expensive. And then a year away, we're removed from Hamilton because his 5th year option will be cheap. Yeah, and they get him after year 4. I mean, the players are all there to be signed. You do not have to go outside the organization. You have to make the best possible decisions about who you're going to heartbreakingly lose among the players you have. But every exterior contract signed that's a really big money deal is just going to piss me off, I'm afraid, at this point. it's going to be deals not made with the guys who could be had cheaply now. Yeah,
and they've had that trend for a while. It was safety, right? And I guess it still was with Marcus Williams, right? Yep. It still was with him, and maybe to a lesser extent, wide receiver. They weren't signing those guys to like huge deals, but they were bringing in a bunch of free agent guys. Don't need to do that anymore. Yep. But yeah, you're right about Andrews. That would be a tough one just because of everything that he's been. But I get it. If that's what it comes to, considering the financials, they're well positioned with Likely and Kohler to absorb that if that's the direction that they decide to go in. But you're right on defense too. Just a really good group of young players, talented. Go ahead and try to get those guys signed early if you can. Keep that core group together, and then just hope that you can continue to draft and develop. And then obviously you're going to go to free agency for some things. Supplement with trade. You're still going to do that, but if you can do that at reasonable prices.
Or bargain bin all the time, if that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with the clearance rack.
They have proven an incredible ability to do that with pass rushers, and if you're good at that, why buy expensive? Why buy Gucci when you can identify?
Yeah, you can do it. If you can do it and you can wear it and you can make it look good, then you should keep doing that.
There you go. All right, I'm going to try and hustle us up through the packages. Just go real quick. The Bengals present a very easy set of offensive personnel packages for the defense to work off of. So they almost never do anything different. They use big nickel 26 times, standard nickel 41 times. Big nickel is very effective in part because, hey, Kyle Hamilton is on the field on all of those snaps. They allowed 4.1 yards per play. That was obviously all in the first half because Hamilton got injured and had to leave. And then the standard nickel came on, and that had Mollett with either Hamilton or Washington back at strong safety. It was Washington, obviously, in the second half, was Hamilton a lot in the first half. And they gave up 8.1 yards per play on that, which maybe not obviously, but includes the 2 long touchdown passes. So that will have an effect on that. And then they played 6 snaps a dime again, which I thought we might have seen some of the last of, but they hauled it back out again on the Bengals' final drive, despite the fact, you're down Hamilton. So you have to find 3 other guys to tag as safeties in that group. And I mean, they've got them obviously on the team. They've got Eddie Jackson and Marcus Williams and Washington, and then 3 corners to go with that. But they did a pretty good job with that on the team. Do you think are the Bengals to you unusual in terms of you can't hope to get that sort of opponent week after week that you know what personnel they're playing pretty much down after down.
Probably not. Probably not. Certainly outside of the division, probably not. But yeah, I'd leave it. Yeah, I think there's going to be more variation with other opponents. With the Bengals, particularly with Higgins being out, you really kind of knew what they were going to try to do, or not even try, kind of only what they could do at that point. Because I don't know that they're still like super comfortable with where Burton is at. I think they like Yoshivas, but he kind of.
They know where Burton is. He's in the casino, right? At the
they do. There's video evidence, so we can easily identify where he's at.
Just hilarious.
I think they like Yoshivas, but he kind of is what he is at this point. Not that he can't develop into more, but that's what he is at this point. And so they're going to go to Gesicki. They're going to bring in the other tight ends, and it's you could tell from the very beginning of this game, and I guess even going back to the first game, they probably saw it. They just decided, look, we're just going to lean completely into Joe Burrow, Lamar Chase, LSU offense. Get them in the gun, and we're just going to sling this thing all over the place. If we got to throw it 60 times a game, we'll throw it 60 times a game. It doesn't matter. Joe can do it. The run game, ineffective. It's hard to even describe it that way because they weren't really even trying.
Right.
So you kind of could see that, hey, they were going to put this on Joe and say, go out there and win this thing by throwing it all over the yard. And, they almost did it.
Did they have any run over 10 yards in the whole game? If they did, it was probably like one or something. No, their long run of the whole game was 7 yards by Chase Brown. Burrow had a 6-yarder. So it was not much, needless to say. Looking ahead of the Steelers. Okay. You see a team that will present more differentiation up front for you there. A differentiation, of offensive package. That's what I meant.
Yeah, possibly. Just because for me, they maybe not for them. Obviously, they'll be studying, and coaches, advanced scouts, stuff like that, probably already have a handle on this stuff. I've not watched them a ton, so I don't know if they will. They could because I'm not really sure what they're leaning into now that they've had Russell Wilson at quarterback for a couple of games now, and they've kind of committed to him. He's a different style, obviously, than Justin Fields. Very different style. You're going to be doing different things with Russ, and so you probably want different guys on the field around him. So I'm not sure. And then Arthur Smith, right? New offensive coordinator, year one for them, and you maybe aren't super in the. I mean, I guess you go back to his Titans days, and you do probably have a pretty good feel for what he likes to do. But different team, different personnel. But yeah, should be some differences from the Bengals for sure.
Okay. And the Bengals don't use things like a 6th offensive lineman very often. And the Steelers, I think, do more of that. And they obviously are more tight end centric, I believe, still, even though you see a lot of 12 from the Bengals. I think you see a little different type of 12 from the Steelers and probably some 13. So we'll see how this goes. But they want to get Najee Harris and others. Warren, I guess. Warren isn't hurt right now, is he?
I don't think so. I think he's back.
Okay. So, those guys are big tackle breakers. And so they want to get level 2 opportunities, first contact opportunities for them. And they've been very effective, frankly, over the last couple of years at breaking tackles. So that should be one way where the Ravens match up very well against the Steelers is that, even with level 2 first contact opportunities, you're probably not going to break runs against, Smith and Simpson and others who have very good missed tackle rates.
Yeah, and I think, of course, we'll see because it's easy to talk about it. But, once the game starts, you see how it unfolds. I think that lines up well. And I think a quarterback like Russ also kind of lines up well for them because Russ likes to hold the ball. Okay, Russ likes to hold the ball. He wants to get the ball downfield. Now, if he can get it downfield against the secondary, you probably don't feel crazy. You probably don't feel great about that. But if you can force him to hold it and those guys can actually give you some level of decent coverage on the back end, maybe you can get to him. Maybe the rush can get to him. Maybe you can force him into some bad decisions. That could be something that lines up well for them. But if he holds it, has time, gets it off, and can throw it down the field, that obviously could be a problem.
All right, we'll look forward to that one. Obviously, a big game coming up in 10 days. Let's talk a little bit about the pass rush, then we'll cut it off for part one here. I want to go through a few things here, and I'll just lay out some statistical things, then we can talk about maybe what this means. one of the big problems, obviously, is that the Ravens hadn't been generating as many pressures in these last couple of games. But this week, 17 ample time and spaces, which is a lot for one game until you realize that Joe Burrow threw the ball 59 times or was sacked, total of 59 times. So then it's 29%, which is a very, very average number. The problem was the Ravens back end, or whatever combination you want to talk about here, 15.6 yards per play on those plays. 8.5 is about right for ATS. So it's a subset. It's a very, high value subset of all passing plays, but 15.6 is still way too high. And you know why it's even way more too high is that the Ravens used essentially a 4-man rush the entire day, which means they've got 7 in coverage. You're playing to make Burrow throw into the teeth of your coverage. And you're conceding the fact that you're going to give up some additional ATS opportunities. Then the line has a great pass rush day, and they provide you with pressure that ruins his opportunity set. We'll get to the rest of that in a second. And yet you still give up 15.6 yards, per ATS opportunity when you've got seven men back. Now you can understand if the 5-man rush keeps getting blocked up and you've got 6 men back, you expect him to do better. If somehow they're getting 7-man rushes blocked up, you probably expect them to do better. But this, I can find little good for the secondary in terms of having 7 back and giving up that kind of a yards per throw thing. Yes, I could take out the 2 big throws, and that's 137 yards of it, and they'd be down to 128 on 15, and it'd still be a little too high. Not way too high. It'd be about 8.5, but it'd still be more than I would think is the right number, given that I've got 7 in coverage.
Yeah, it's just more that it's more than what you want. It's definitely more than what you want. I think anybody on that defense would tell you that. Several of them did after the game, that it's just not good enough. Burrow's playing really well right now. Obviously, Chase is playing well right now, but it's just too much, right? And I know, and I get that, and you have to account for that part of it. Okay, this isn't Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton. This is Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, so you have to factor that in. But it's still too much. It's just too much.
I'm lost on the fact that they can't minimize what Chase can do. You might have to make concessions other places. Maybe Yoshevas becomes a big target at that point. Maybe, Burton, all of a sudden he can confidently throw to and beat you a few times. But if you know that Jamar Chase is lined up with you, and it's just like they can't find any way to stop that pairing. I mean, you got one sticky as hell corner who can certifiably get his hands on the football. He might get a little grabby, but he can get his hands on the football. And that's Wiggins. I'd let him have his shot. I'd travel with him to go after Chase in some ways. Could he get beat on a few slants? Maybe. Is he going to get beat on a 67 or a 70 yarder? I think it's a lot less likely in his case. Got too much makeup speed, and you probably run less risk of that occurring. It's frustrating to me that there's no real way to adjust to it. And basically, since the Ravens corners don't travel, they put Chase on whatever side of the field that they want for their play design. We're going to want to run a back shoulder throw because we need 8 yards here. Let's put Chase on the left against Stevens. Or we want to figure out how to make him go deep. Maybe the slot is the best place if we use this combination. It's just, to me, that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, and there are times where they do things to try to take him out. They'll double him. They'll play cover 2 to his side when he's the single receiver. They'll do different things, and some of those plays are effective where they actually just don't throw the ball to him, for whatever reason. But typically, that's part of it, right? Because maybe Burrow sees that, he sees he's bracketed, he sees he's got a safety over the top, but there's somebody else just wide ass open on him. So he just says, "I'm just going to throw it over there."
Well, they were not really successful throwing the ball to other receivers in this game. Burton has been kind of a up and down character anyway for the year.
Like a slot machine, like a handle.
You never know what you're going to spin to. But they threw a bunch of checkdowns to Chase Brown, 11 targets for 52 yards. Nobody's going to be worried about giving up those passes. I think you kind of mentioned that earlier. Hudson, 6 yards a target. I'm not concerned about that. Gesicki, who has been a thorn in the Ravens side at times, 9 targets for 30 yards. I mean, it's all Chase. He's the guy who's the weapon. It's like we're back at this Raiders game against. We're the only two guys who can beat you, except it's only one this time. The only two guys who can beat you then were Brock Bowers and Devontae Adams, and they can't figure out a way to adjust to try and stop that. The game is complicated, but it shouldn't be impossible to figure out how to take one weapon away like that, even if you have to give something else up. And at some point, after everything they give up to Chase in this game, you gotta at least try that strategy for a short period.
Yeah. And it's kind of been my mantra this season with the secondary. All options should be on the table.
All right, fair enough. Let's see. I did want to talk about a couple other things. By the way, when the ball was out quickly, Burrow was his ineffective self that he's been in the past against the Ravens. 4.6 yards per pass on 14 plays. No problem with that. They pressured him 28 times in this game. That's 47%. Best Ravens pressure of the season. 92 yards on those plays, 3.3. That's below the 3.5 average that I would expect on those. It was all in those ATS throws. It was when they gave up an ATS throw, they gave away big yards, and they had guys in coverage. They had more bodies in coverage anyway, and you just hope that it wouldn't occur so regularly. I want to talk about one other thing. Anything else to say about that before we move on?
No, it's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell, but you want to be hopeful, and you listen to these guys every week about knowing what they're doing, practicing it, doing it well in practice, but then it doesn't carry over to the game. And you're just like, at some point it's got to carry over to the game, right? They're too good. They're too talented. It's got to carry over. We're 10 games in. It hasn't carried over. But, I guess just me, I can totally understand anybody else if they're like, nah, man, this ain't it. It ain't happening without changes. But I'm like, at some point, right, it's gotta click at some point. It's just gotta click. But I don't know. There's definitely something going on. This is the last thing I guess I'll say about it so we can move on, than just the players on the field. And more than just Zach Orr. There's more going on. There's more. There has to be more going on.
I agree. And we can only kind of see the tip of the iceberg, part of the whole Marcus Williams sitting and then keeping it internal and, not talking about it. First of all, brilliant that they would handle it that way, because that gives you a chance to correct the problem without having to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Okay. But if Williams, if the problem is that the players hate the coach's scheme, there are only two solutions for it. You can have a bunch of come to Jesus meetings, and you can have Harbaugh or even Eric DeCosta, or it's inappropriate for Eric DeCosta to do this, but you can have Harbaugh or their positional coaches talk to them, because they're really the only groups, I guess, because it's not going to do any good for Orr to talk to them, on that basis. I guess he could, but you don't want your defensive coordinator being in a position to be a guy who's making threats to the players. It's really more like you want to keep it as a secondhand thing where you say, look, Zach's gonna sit your ass if you don't get this right. If you can't figure out how to play the proper leverage, if you can't figure out how to be in the right spot, he's going to sit you. And I wouldn't have an excuse for him. It's much better to say it that way than to have Zach Orr have to basically tell the guy directly, hey, look, sit down. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. I need you to fix these things. It's almost like you're at DEFCON 1 when you do that. And if the player says something stupid at that point, I don't know how you fix it. That obviously that something did happen with Marcus Williams where he said something stupid, probably either to Orr or Harbaugh about the scheme. And he had to ride the pine for a week.
Yeah. You definitely feel like there was some kind of verbal thing, or maybe something that happened in a meeting or happened in practice, something else going on there. But, I think, and rightfully so, because he's the defensive coordinator. So on defense, the buck stops with him, but there's so much talk about, but you just don't hear as much. And this is partly where I think, or at least I'm wondering if maybe there's some other issues there, is with these position coaches, because all three of those dudes are new. Dennis Johnson is new. Mark DeLeon is new. Doug Mallory is new. Now, DeLeon and Mallory are experienced coaches. They've been around the league and even coached in college. So it's not new in terms of experience, but they're new to the Ravens. Now, Mallory, I know he was with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan for a couple of years. So you could say, well, he knows the system. Yeah, but he wasn't an on-field coach there, I don't think, or at least not a game day on-field coach. Yeah, I think he was doing some consulting or something like that. So that's a little bit different. De Leon, I know he coached Roquan in Chicago. Obviously, he's got that relationship, but again, new to the Ravens. And Dennis Johnson, I think is his first NFL coaching job. I think he coached at Baylor last year. Maybe it was at LSU prior to that. It was his first NFL coaching job. So I just think, and I think Denard said this when he was on with you last year, it was the perfect storm of coaches, players, and system. Mm-hmm. And now that's, some of the players are still here, but that coaching staff, in terms of that group of guys, is broken up. And you bring these other guys in and it's just natural. You're going to lose some of that cohesiveness. Those guys had been together for at least 2 years, right? 22 and 23. And so, you're speaking the same language. Some of those guys have been around for even longer, right? Weaver had been here for longer than that. He had been around. I know Denard Wilson was a newer guy, but he had a reputation as being really good in the secondary. And I think you're still seeing that even in Tennessee. Overall, defensively, not great. But I think the secondary, considering the guys that they got there outside of L'Jarius Sneed, they're doing a pretty solid job. So I don't know, man. I know, like I said, the buck stops with Zach. So people are going to really point the finger there, as they should, because he's ultimately responsible. But I got to think there's something going on at the position level, too, with just the way that these guys are playing. It can't just be about the scheme. There's got to be something else going on.
First of all, completely buy that. Okay. And they did suffer a lot of losses. We know that. I would make it a priority. First of all, if I'm Steve Bisciotti and the people are down at my house in Jupiter, Florida for the annual meeting, okay, that they have internal with the coaching staff and whatnot, at least it's at the coordinator level, I think, and above. The first thing I would want is to make sure that I had a succession worthy set of position coaches. It's not under the cap. It's additional dollars that could be spent. If you buy insurance on your players, you're effectively buying cap. You know about that, right? Okay, so you can buy insurance on your players, and if they get injured, then you get a return. So the Browns, for example, have insurance on Deshaun Watson, and they're going to get some return if he can't play for them. They'll get some return from this year in terms of his dollar. I don't know how much he's insured for, and then they'll presumably get a return next year, or they might if lawyers start to get involved and he's not really able to play. And that money counts as a return from player that is a credit to your salary cap.
Okay.
So it's effectively, you might pay 25% of the player's salary to buy that insurance, but it's a way to buy additional cap, not on a guaranteed basis, but it's possible. And so there's really no incentive not to insure the whole team if you say, I want the most possible cap and I don't care how many real dollars it costs me.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And if I'm extending that in terms of I want the best possible coaches, and I don't care how I just can't spend cap on it because that's the scarce resource. Mm-hmm. No problem. Go out and spend $3 million a positional coach if you want to, and get some. I mean, they got Chuck Smith. That was a great find. I don't know what they're paying him, but it's probably premium dollars. They got these other guys before, but I would make it a complete plan to. You got a 62-year-old coach, I believe, next year. I'm going to be 61. Harbaugh is now. I'm going to be 62. Damn it, it sucks. Okay, so Harbaugh will be 63. Okay, and you can sell succession with a 63-year-old coach. Okay, and by the way, the other thing is, hey, you get to coach for the Baltimore Ravens, who have all this talent in place. Yeah, and you get a terrific new set of position coaches. You carefully reassess everybody, and you make certainly strategic cuts, but I think you do whatever is necessary to try and upgrade your coaching staff and make these guys that you have worthy of the succession plan. Whether that means you bring them in at the lowest level, such that they're defense, such that they're a position coordinator, the next, and then a defense or offensive coordinator a level removed, and then possibly a head coaching candidate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good strategy. I like it. I think you see probably some of the better teams maybe take that approach, right? You hear them about investing a whole lot of money into their coaching staffs and trying to get the best teachers that they can find, the best communicators that they can find. I'm not saying that these guys are not, because I don't know that. So I'm not going to talk about things that I'm not familiar with. But you just got to think that there's other stuff going on because of what you're seeing on the field. So you got to think, okay, this is more than just, oh, we're not playing these coverages right. Oh, we're making these same mistakes game in and game out. Now, there's a reason why that's happening. It's not just physical. Yeah, it's mental. Yeah, it's miscommunication. But why is it mental? Why is it, some of those guys we talked about from last year who were here who weren't having those issues. And I know it's not the exact same scheme, but it's not super, super different, I don't think, in terms of the bones of the system. That's been around for years now. And each coordinator has kind of come in and put their own little spin on it, their own version on it. So I don't know. There's just something there. Maybe we'll hear about it after the season. Maybe, there'll be more stuff that kind of leaks out. Usually there is. But yeah, there's something more here than meets the eye, in my opinion.
All right. I think we've pretty much hit on everything for this first part that I want to talk to you. I do want to mention Mike and Denard Melton do a show, The Fire Zone.
Yeah.
Outstanding. I highly recommend it. Talk about that. Talk about your, are you still doing the other pod as well?
So both pods are kind of on hiatus this year. So I was doing the Fire Zone show with Denard, and that's an all defensive show. That's all we talked about on that show. And then Deep Cover I did with Chris Aguilera and Kerry Stevenson. And we've been doing that since 19, I think. But yeah, we've kind of done fewer shows this season than maybe we've ever done before. We started to tail off a little bit last year. They were kind of dragging me across the finish line. And then we've kind of tailed off even more this year. I guess, and you know this because you and I have talked about this, I kind of feel like I'm just moving away from as much football content as I used to do. I still love watching film. I still love evaluating players. So I'm still kind of doing that just on my own. But in terms of pods and YouTube stuff like I used to do, kind of, winding that stuff down a little bit. And it's hard for me because I really enjoy doing it with those guys. They're great, great guys. And I feel kind of bad in some ways about that. But, it's one of those things where, you get to a certain point in your life, and you talked about being 62 next year. I'll be 50 in June. And, you're just sort of reprioritizing some things. And that's kind of where I'm at. And, does that mean it's over? No. But could you count on those shows coming out with any regularity? That's also a no. So I'll just say that.
Let's not throw the show under the bus. Let's just say when it's out there, it's good. Whether you're talking about Fire,
and that's on me. That's on me. Just to be clear, the fact that they're not coming out with any regularity, that's wholly on me. It has nothing to do with Denard or Chris or Kerry. Those guys are able, willing, and ready. It's 100% me, and I really appreciate them for kind of giving me the grace to kind of do this the way I've been doing it, because I think they'd like to be doing it more too. And like I said, I feel a little bad about that, but they've also been really supportive and like, hey, if you've got other things going on, like in your personal life, and that you feel like need to be more of a priority, we 100% support that, 100% behind you. Do whatever you need to do.
He's at Abukari on Twitter. That's Abukari. There's a whole story behind that. You can ask him about it. It's extremely entertaining, historical, and something you can look up with some YouTube videos that has an interesting story behind it. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I'd also really appreciate the loyalty of the audience here. Really appreciate the listeners and sticking with us. We're going to get to questions in the second half of the show, but please use hashtag Film Study Mailbag for any of the shows. Try to make it clear which show you'd like it to be answered on, whether it's Friday Morning GM or Defense or Offense podcast, and I'll try and make sure we get through it. Michael, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks again for having me, Ken. It was a blast. I enjoy it every time.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.